The grand hall was a masterpiece of sensory overload designed to overwhelm. 1,000 points of light, bleeding from cascading constellations of tear-shaped crystal, reflected mercilessly off polished marble and the delicate sweat-beaded glasses of sparkling wine that sat abandoned on trays. It was a silent, glorious assault on the senses, making the entire affair feel less like a party and more like a breathtaking, feverish dream. And in the heart of this manufactured paradise, every single soul had turned their unblinking scrutiny toward the two statuesque forms standing perfectly still. Rhys Sterling, the public's darling, the actor with the practiced blinding smile that never quite reached his eyes, stood at the altar, desperately trying to moderate his breathing. His soul felt heavy, weighted down by a guilt that had become his only constant companion. Standing beside him was Sylvie. She was quiet, almost fragile, with enormous storm cloud gray eyes that, to him, seemed to hold all the sincerity left in the world. She looked breathtakingly, almost painfully beautiful in her simple white gown, devoid of the aggressive jewels and designer flourishes that dominated the room. That simplicity made her the true queen in this suffocating sea of imposed luxury. He looked at her, and his heart clenched with a strange mixed agony, a tight Gordian knot where profound love and crushing shame were inextricably wound together. This sickening feeling had been haunting him relentlessly for 3 weeks. It had started the instant that drunken, nonsensical argument stopped being just an argument and mutated into a ferocious, all-consuming obsession. Rhys's gaze darted across the guest rows, unconsciously seeking out his accomplice, the only other man who shared this unbearable secret. He found him instantly. Jax was seated in the 3rd row, openly, brazenly smirking. He didn't even try to hide it. With a demonstrative, utterly insolent gesture, he raised his champagne flute as if toasting a victory. It was a stupid, drunken, repulsive wager. I bet you the great and incomparable leading man can't make that speechless little charity bird fall in love with you and get her to the altar in 1 month. Rhys had done it. He proved he could. But then something fundamental had inverted inside him. It had cracked, broken, and irrevocably changed his inner landscape. He fell in love with her silence. In a world where everyone was endlessly talking, lying, and playing roles, her quietude was the single authentic, true thing left in the world. He fell in love with her clear, honest, piercing gaze that seemed to see right through the thespian, past the golden boy, and simply recognized Rhys. Most astonishingly of all, her eyes never judged him. His family occupied the front row. They were stiff, regal, and imposing, arranged like sovereigns on a throne. His mother, Eleanor Sterling, the matriarch, she was the absolute paragon of flawless style, an ice queen of surgical perfection. Her smile was worth a small fortune and was just as cold and artificial. She was the primary trustee and chief donor to the Compassion Initiative, the very charity where he and Sylvie had met. She watched Sylvie with cool, detached approval. She saw her as a rare, valuable, successfully acquired object that fit seamlessly into the meticulously curated Sterling life. The perfect daughter-in-law, beautiful, with a good, if tragic, backstory, and, most importantly, silent. His father, Senator Sterling, the politico, sat beside her. His custom-tailored suit was immaculate. His face was just as immaculate and blank. An impassively smooth visage like polished marble. He was the human functionary, the living embodiment of a transactional approach to everything, including family.
Rhys Sterling, the officiant's voice boomed, solemn and ceremonious, ripping him out of his thick, dreadful thoughts. Do you take this woman, Sylvie Thorne, to be your lawfully wedded wife? Rhys looked at Sylvie. She was looking directly at him, and the chasm of trust in her gaze brought on a fresh wave of self-loathing. His entire life, the fake, glossy, repulsive thing it was, flashed before his eyes. And in that flash, he saw another life with incredible clarity, the life reflected in her eyes, simple, honest, and quiet. I do. Rhys's voice sounded solid and resolute. He had made his choice. It was final. To hell with the wager. To hell with everything. He just wanted to be with this woman, to become the man she already believed him to be. The officiant, a kindly-looking elderly woman, beamed at them approvingly. "And you, Sylvie Thorne." A deep, deafening pause descended. All the guests, his family, Rhys himself, everyone froze, anticipating the usual meek, nearly imperceptible nod. But Sylvie didn't nod. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, as if overcoming an invisible physical resistance, she turned her head away from Rhys. Her gaze, now suddenly heavy and utterly merciless, slid across the rows of guests and fixed, like a blade, directly upon Eleanor Sterling. Rhys saw his mother's perfect, calculated smile twitch. First, it simply froze, and then, like a thin fracture spreading across smooth morning ice, it began to slowly, relentlessly slide away, exposing raw confusion and festering rage beneath. What is happening?" Rhys thought wildly. Sylvie drew a deep, audible breath, filling her lungs, and the entire glittering, fundamentally false hall was filled with her voice. It was clean, strong, low, and absolutely stunningly unexpected. "Before I say I do, I want everyone gathered here today to know exactly who Eleanor Sterling is." Rhys froze solid. He stopped breathing, feeling an icy wave roll down his spine. His mother's face erupted in ugly, mottled red splotches. What is she saying?" his father hissed, jerking Eleanor's elbow. "Call security immediately. Get her out of here." "I saw it," Sylvie continued, her voice never wavering for a second. It was hard and cutting, like polished granite. "I saw how you systematically stole donations from the Compassion Initiative, the very place where Rhys and I met." Jax, in the third row, choked on his champagne, and his cough echoed loudly in the ringing silence. The guests froze, morphing into a row of immobile, shocked statues. Absolute, profound quiet reigned where music and restrained laughter had been moments before. "You stole from children." Sylvie took a decisive step forward, releasing Rhys's hand. "You stole from those who couldn't ask for help. You stole from me." Eleanor Sterling rocketed to her feet. Her face was contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. All her gloss and perfection vanished in an instant. "How dare you, you despicable wretch! You are sick, insane. Rhys, do something. Make her shut up." Sylvie looked at her calmly, almost detachedly. "Insane?" She slowly raised her hand, in which, unnoticed until now, she had been clutching her small cell phone. "And this handwriting, Eleanor Sterling, do you recognize it? This is a scan of your own signed memo authorizing the transfer of funds from the charitable foundation to your private, offshore account." She turned the bright screen towards the guests. "Would you like me to project all of this on the jumbo screens right now? I have all the proof with me. Dozens of transfers, invoices for your diamonds, for your overseas vacations, all paid for with money that was supposed to fund necessary surgeries for critically ill children." Now the silence was complete and final. Senator Sterling turned white as bone. He gripped his wife's arm so hard she cried out in pain and surprise. "We need to leave, now, this very second." They didn't walk. They practically sprinted, bolting for the exit, pushing past the stunned guests and loudly overturning expensive chairs. Like rats abandoning a sinking ship, sensing the coming doom. Trailing behind them, stumbling and shoving, rushed several other close relatives and the family's business associates. The hall, full of people just a minute ago, was noticeably empty within 30 seconds. Sylvie watched them go, and her shoulders finally relaxed. Then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, she turned back to Rhys. His face was ghost white. He was in deep shock, his world collapsing before his eyes. But in his gaze, as he looked at her, there was no fear, no condemnation. There was only stunned, boundless admiration and a strange, bitter pride. "Now you know the whole truth," she said softly, almost whispering. Her lips were visibly straining, betraying the gigantic strain she was under. Rhys looked at her radiant eyes full of unshed tears and incredible, iron strength. He looked away, toward the wide open doors through which his perfect, fake family had just fled. Then he firmly took her cold hand in his, feeling the fragile bones of her fingers. "Yes," he said loudly and clearly, addressing the stunned, bewildered officiant, "I do. I want to take this woman as my wife." He turned back to Sylvie, seeing only her. "I love you even more, Sylvie. More than I can ever express." The officiant, a pale, middle-aged woman, cleared her throat convulsively. She had seen much in her career, but never, ever anything like this. Based on the submitted paperwork, I pronounce you husband and wife."
Sylvie's apartment wasn't just small. It was a microcosm of cozy chaos. There was no space to spare, but the air was dense with the rich, living scents of turmeric, cardamom, and fresh ground coffee, odors of actual breathing life that Rhys had never known in the sterile, marble-cold Sterling mansion. Hundreds of books, stacked like bricks, lined the walls. The sofa was old and sunken, but seemed designed for blissful oblivion, draped with a soft, well-loved throw. Rhys stood in the middle of it all, in his crumpled tuxedo, feeling not just ridiculous, but monstrously alien. A grand piano mistakenly delivered to a tiny closet. Sylvie emerged from the bedroom. The wedding gown was gone. She wore a simple gray t-shirt and soft athletic shorts. Her hair was pulled into a sweet, effortless bun, an image 1,000 times more genuine than any bridal perfection. "Here," she handed him a neatly folded stack of clothes, a faded band t-shirt and worn sweatpants. "It's going to look absurd, but at least it will be comfortable." He changed in the cramped but clean bathroom. When he emerged, she was already on the sofa, a laptop resting on her knees. Her face was focused and serious, like a surgeon before an operation. "Well," she said without looking up, "the process is initiated. It has begun." She turned the screen toward him, and he saw an endless scroll of news feeds. Scandal at celebrity wedding. Bride accuses matriarch of fraud. Eleanor Sterling's compassion initiative under investigation. Rhys Sterling, the public's darling, faces career and family collapse. The headlines were yellow, screaming, and merciless. That's just rumors and gossip right now," Rhys stammered, trying to find footing. "The guests spread it." "It's not gossip." Sylvie calmly opened another browser tab. "It's my article. It went live 10 minutes ago, officially." She hit the enter key, and the quiet, short click sounded like a gunshot, triggering the irreversible mechanism of destruction. The article, titled "The Trustees, Charity as a Business Model," was dry, devoid of emotion, and utterly lethal. There was no journalistic poetry, only naked, irrefutable evidence. Scans of offshore account transfers, transcripts of former shelter employees' testimony, photographs of luxury yacht and jewelry purchases paid for directly from the Compassion Initiative's fund accounts. Rhys read. With every line, with every new piece of evidence, his blood ran cold, and his heart clenched with profound shame. These were not just abstract schemes. This was money meant for emergency surgeries, for warm clothes in the winter, for meals for the very children he'd briefly visited to
play charity for a magazine photo op. He sank heavily onto the sofa beside her. I didn't know, he whispered, feeling the hollowness of the words. I didn't grasp the scale. You didn't want to know, she corrected, softly but inexorably. And that is a vast difference. He looked at this fragile-looking woman who had just single-handedly, like a grand strategist, brought down what seemed like an unbreakable empire of lies. Why didn't you leave when you collected all the evidence? He asked, his voice raw. Why was the whole wedding charade necessary? Sylvie closed the laptop. The quiet whirring of the fan suddenly stopped, leaving a heavy silence. I had to look her in the eye, she answered simply. I didn't want it to be an anonymous strike. I gave her a chance, a final chance. A chance? Rhys didn't understand. I met her alone a week ago. I told her I knew everything. I offered her a way out, return all the money, quietly step down from the fund, and simply walk away from our lives. Rhys couldn't believe his ears. And she? She laughed in my face. Sylvie gave a bitter, sharp smile, recalling the moment. She called me a dirty shelter mouse who should be grateful for scraps. She said if I so much as peeped, she would annihilate me, and then. What then? Rhys asked quietly. She offered me money, a large sum, to simply get lost from your life. She said you would soon tire of your little game of love and come running back to the family. Rhys felt physically ill, nauseated by the sheer cynicism of his mother, Eleanor Sterling. She thought everyone and everything could be bought, Sylvie finished, her voice steel. She didn't know I wasn't for sale, for any money in the world. And me? Rhys asked softly, almost soundlessly. Was I just a piece of your brilliant plan? A pawn? You were the biggest, most beautiful complication in my plan, she said with disarming honesty. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with the son of the primary target of my investigation, and you weren't supposed to fall for the subject of a wager. But we both made that mistake. Or perhaps it was a miracle. Rhys activated his phone. The device instantly exploded with notifications, hundreds of missed calls, dozens of angry, panicked messages from his father, his mother, Jax, his agent. He opened the last message from his father, Senator Sterling. You are dead to me. Do not call. You betrayed your family, your name. You are no longer my son, ever. Rhys stared at the spiteful, crooked letters. He expected to feel sharp pain, the bitterness of loss, scorching fear. But he felt nothing but a huge, all-consuming relief, as if a weight he had carried his entire life had finally fallen from his shoulders. He calmly deleted the message. The next was from his agent. Rhys, the theater is panicking. They are canceling the contract. Reputational risk. Tomorrow's shoot canceled. Call me immediately. We need to meet. That was it. The finale. The end of his career. He was no longer a Sterling. He was not the public's darling. He was now simply Rhys, a man in borrowed sweatpants, in a tiny but cozy apartment, beside the most dangerous, strongest, and most honest woman he had ever met. He turned to Sylvie. She was watching him, holding her breath, waiting for his decision, his word. Rhys set the phone aside, away from them both. I have 2 pieces of news for you, wife. Oh, what are they? She raised her eyebrow. First, I'm fired. From everything. It seems my brilliant acting career, built exclusively on my father's connections and money, has officially ended. That is, arguably, the worst news I've heard all day, she smiled, and her smile held support and understanding. And the second, he pulled her close, inhaling the subtle, familiar scent of her hair. For the first time on this insane, endless day, he kissed her, truly, deeply and tenderly. It was not the kiss of an actor playing a role. It was the kiss of a man who had nothing left to lose but this woman. The second, he said when they finally broke apart to catch their breath, I have one excellent, brilliant idea of what we can do on our first wedding night. And what is that? She whispered, gazing into his eyes. Sleep, he said with comical seriousness. We are utterly exhausted, and tomorrow we improvise. Together. Sylvie laughed, wrapping her arms around him. It was the best, most sincere and happiest ending to their crazy, beautiful, unpredictable wedding.
10 years later, the calm before the storm. A sunbeam, warm and gentle, streamed through the foliage of an old maple, casting dancing spots of light on the wooden garden furniture. The lawn was perfect, well maintained. A bright yellow ball lay forgotten in the emerald grass. The deafening, infectious sound of children's laughter seemed to fill everything with life. Rhys, now the acclaimed director of an avant-garde independent theater, about which critics wrote either genius or insufferable, sat on the porch of their country home, savoring his morning coffee. The house was not a palace, nothing like the cold Sterling mansion. It was alive, breathing, wooden, smelling of pine and freshness, filled with sunlight and comfort. Sylvie, now the chief editor of a major, influential investigative publication, sat across from him with her tablet, scanning the morning news. She had grown even more beautiful over the years, a wise depth in her storm-cloud gray eyes. Andrew, she called out, without taking her eyes off the screen, but clearly controlling the space. 5 minutes. Go wash up. Breakfast is almost ready. Aw, Mom! A disgruntled but cheerful voice echoed from the lawn. Rhys smiled tenderly, watching her. Their 9-year-old son, Andrew Markovich Andrews, Sylvie had insisted on using her true family name, and Rhys had been only too happy to agree, was the center of their universe, their greatest joy and pride. I'll get 'em, Rhys stood up. You're working. He leaned in, kissed the top of her head, inhaling her familiar, native scent, and then walked toward the lawn. Andrew, drop the ball. Dad will play with you. He stepped onto the soft, perfect grass. The sun was beginning its gentle decline, painting the sky in soft, pastel tones. Andrew? Silence. Only the sound of birds singing somewhere in the branches. On the grass, at the base of the old, sprawling apple tree, lay only the solitary yellow ball. Andrew, Rhys smiled, thinking his son had started a game of hide-and-seek. Not time for games. He walked around the house, checking behind the corner, in the shed where the bikes were kept. No one. Empty. Sylvie, his voice trembled, anxiety creeping in. Did you see where he went? Sylvie stepped onto the porch, her face instantly serious, strained. She knew that tone, that note of panic in his voice. He was right here, she pointed to the lawn, right here by the apple tree, kicking the ball. They ran quickly, almost sprinting, around the entire property. And then Rhys noticed it. The gate in the back of the garden, which had been securely locked since Andrew's birth, now stood slightly ajar. I'm calling the police. Sylvie reached for her phone. Her fingers, which never shook in the face of the most powerful people, were now visibly trembling. Wait, Rhys grabbed her arm sharply, his gaze fixated on the gate. Look. Something small, light, and fluttering in the breeze was hanging on the metal gate handle. Not a note. A small, faded silk handkerchief, embroidered with the elegant monogram, E.S. A handkerchief his mother, Eleanor Sterling, always, under all circumstances, carried in her pocket. Rhys hadn't seen that handkerchief in 10 long years. For 10 years they had heard nothing about her. After the loud, public trial that had sentenced Eleanor Victoria Sterling to 7 years of real prison time for large-scale fraud, she had seemingly vanished from their lives forever. His father, Senator Sterling, they had learned from an accidental source, died a year after the sentencing. He couldn't withstand the shame, the collapse, and the public condemnation. And Jax, he served his time. Released on parole 2 years ago, he had gone to ground, dissolving into obscurity, showing no signs of life. Until today. No, Rhys whispered, his voice catching. She's broken, destroyed, She waited. Sylvie's voice became icy, sharp as a razor. In that moment, the mother died, and the cold, calculating investigative journalist awoke. Rhys's phone, resting on the table on the porch, rang shrilly, tearing through the silence. Both of them lunged for it, as if their lives depended on that call. The screen flashed. Unknown number. Rhys hit accept with a trembling hand. He put it on speaker so Sylvie could hear. At first, there was only emptiness and a quiet static, like a broken old gramophone record playing. And then a voice emerged, dry, creaking like the rusted hinges of a long-abandoned gate. A voice distilled into pure, concentrated venom and wild animal triumph. "Hello, Rhys." Rhys froze, unable to move. "Hello, speechless little charity bird. I know you're there too, listening." Sylvie pressed close to the phone, her face white with rage and fear. "Where is my son, Eleanor? Where is Andrew?" "Your son?" She laughed. Dry, blasphemous laugh came from the phone. "You took my son from me. 10 years ago. You ripped him out of my life." "Rhys made his own choice," Sylvie screamed, losing her composure. "He chose you?" the line shrieked, the voice briefly breaking into hysteria. "He chose dirt? He betrayed his blood, his family, his name." A heavy, wordy pause followed. "You taught him to improvise, Sophia Andrews. And I spent all these 10 years preparing the finale to our play, the main act." "What do you want from us?" Rhys asked, his voice hoarse from suppressed emotion. "Want?" The voice laughed again, and the sound was horrible. "I had everything, absolutely everything, and you two took every last crumb from me. I want you to understand, to feel it to the bottom of your souls." A child's frightened, sobbing voice was heard through the speaker. "Mom! Dad! I'm scared!" "Andrew!" Sylvie screamed, gripping the tabletop so hard her knuckles turned white. "You took my son," Eleanor Sterling hissed, "and now I'm taking yours, forever." Sharp, short beeps. Rhys and Sylvie looked at each other, the same terror and the same fierce resolve in their eyes. Sylvie was already opening her laptop, her fingers once again hard, fast, like a pianist's. She couldn't have done this alone. Her voice was level, cold, professional. She was monitored. She had no money, no connections. Someone helped her. Someone who knows us. "Who?" Rhys exhaled, feeling a new, black cloud descending over their happiness. "Someone who hated us just as much as she did. Someone who also lost everything because of us back then." She turned the laptop screen toward Rhys. The image was a grainy surveillance still taken for a routine assessment months prior. It showed Eleanor Sterling, looking decades older, frail and stooped behind oversized sunglasses, sliding into a worn-out sedan outside a budget supermarket. And at the wheel, Rhys leaned in and a cold dread seized him. "Jax?" "He was her handler the entire time," Sylvie stated, her voice flat and certain. "He waited for her, and they both waited for this exact moment, the moment of our greatest joy and our greatest vulnerability. This wasn't their ending. It was the first move in a new, far more brutal shadow war, a fight for their child, a fight for their very existence, a fight they would now wage side by side with a ferocity the world had never seen."